Today's Dead Idea, we're continuing to part 3 of our epic monster-length series on the medieval Irish Geis, or Jinx of Doom. And today, it is story time. We're going to hear some stories of might and magic and Geisha. So, we got quite a treat in store for you. That's what we're talking about today on Dead Ideas. Hey, thanks for listening, everybody. The music we just heard was composed by Rachel Westhoff, my lovely wife, who has placed a gesh on me to never wear brown shoes with black pants. That's actually a little too close to home. That might be true. I'm BT Newberg, but you can call me Brandon. Andre, thanks for being on the show once again.
Hey, everybody. Glad to be here.
Yeah. I have locked the door, and Andre cannot leave until we finish this series.
Send help. In chariots.
Send neck torques. Okay, so we are continuing our Monster League series on the medieval Irish Geis. Once again, this is a mystical personal rule, Jinx of Doom, or soul-binding rule that kills you. Right? So, in other words, if I wear those brown shoes and black pants, fate gets mad at me, and I suffer more than just a fashion faux pas. Right. Basically, I suffer dishonor at the least, and probably death.
Probably death.
By, a car running me over or something. It's kind of vague how the causality works in it, but fate tracks you down.
Your days are numbered at that point.
Your days are numbered. That's what a geis is. And this comes from medieval Ireland, and we're going to get some of the stories in which this appears today.
Yeah.
Yes. So by this time, we've done our homework. Go back and check out part 1 and part 2 if you haven't done that, because that'll make things make a lot more sense. We went deep into what a geis is. We went into the honor-based society and culture of medieval Ireland, which made geis kind of make sense.
Yeah.
And we also went deep into the social structure and all the ranks and all the different things you had to do in order to maintain your rank or, try to get some upward mobility in the station or slip back down.
Even if you're a dirt farmer, honor matters.
Honor matters even if you are a slave.
A slave,
like
yes.
The Fídir, the transitional slave, or the Shenkleha, basically an actual slave. Yeah. So, Yep. So, go back and listen to those if you haven't yet. But today, like I said, we've done our homework. Now it's story time, and Andre has promised to treat us to one hell of a yarn. And with any time left over, I may tell a few shorter stories as well. But all of this definitely comes from the actual time period we're talking about, medieval Ireland. And they all, of course, feature Geisha. Yes. But before we do that, we have one thing to get out of the way, and that is our fake sponsor.
Fake sponsor.
Yes, we always do a fake sponsor or fake plug, meaning we do not get any money for this. We have no legal relation to this entity.
Yet.
But it's always a local brew that we like to plug, and we do it because we love beer. So, Andre, you brought our brew for today. So, what are we drinking?
So, it is a black beer. Those of you who read Irish stories know that in the epics, the warriors are always sitting around and they are always drinking beer, but it's not just any beer, it is always a vat, an actual vat of black beer. So yes, if you like Guinness and black Irish beers, that goes back a very long time. Today's beer is by Lake Monster Brewery. It is their black lager.
And Lake Monster Brewery is super local for you.
Super local, yeah.
So it's from St. Paul.
Yep, St. Paul, Minnesota.
Minneapolis, St. Paul is where we are, but you actually live like across the street practically.
I basically just get out of bed and fall into Lake Monster Brewery. Yes.
So there's actually another special connection. You mentioned the black beer showing up in medieval Irish literature, but we also talked about the blackened eyebrows, which was a fashion for women in Ireland at the time. And when Andra and I went to Lake Monster to check out their beer, the bartender had blackened eyebrows.
That's true.
That was really cool.
Do you think she did that just for us?
Just for us. Right.
I thought you were going to say we need to blacken our eyebrows with the beer, which I was looking forward to. But
you are welcome to do so.
Great, I'll just anoint myself right now.
Listeners, do it too. All right, let's check it out.
Cheers.
Yeah, it's not too bad. It's not too, it's not a really strong black beer taste. It's
Right.
just subtle.
Yeah, it's not actually a stout. It's a black lager, so
Right.
it's got that like
Yeah.
crisp but smooth.
Yeah, I like it.
Thanks, Lake Monster.
Very good. All right, let's get on to our topic for today. So, the first thing we're going to do is let's get a sense of what this actually sounded like in the actual Old Irish. And there's only one reason why I can do this, and that's because Andre knows just fuck tons about Irish culture, including language. So, Andre...
So I appreciate that lead up, but I'm just going to give a series of disclaimers. So I can recite poems in modern Irish and songs and all kinds of things. I'm not fluent in it. And Old Irish is a whole different kettle of fried fish and chips, as it were. So first of all, no one knows exactly what Old Irish sounded like. And secondly, some of our linguists have spent lifetimes putting together a pretty good idea of what it probably sounded like, and I have not read everything they've written. So I'm going to give my best attempt as someone who kind of speaks modern Irish to give you a little snippet of an old poem.
All right, caveats over.
Yes.
All right, go for it.
All right. Nela fe vi dohiket, vi ngeor guanis ga ngruin gower, ge her frisch la lui fil rohen rihes, rogob do gu moyam fortsu alomni, a drochlek sul roetitar. Nela fe vi dohiket, nela fe vi dohiket, nela fe vi dohiket.
Ooh, okay. I could hear the rhythm of it. Yeah. Okay, but what does that mean? And what is this from?
Right. So this is a excerpt from a story called "The Destruction of the Hostel of the Blood Red God."
That's what the Jerga means?
That is, yeah.
Wow.
It's the destruction of Jedriga's hostel, and
Uh-huh.
one way to read that would be the Red God or the Blood Red God.
Okay.
So,
I'm envisioning a Conan novel right now.
It
The
is
cover,
very-
at least, comes
my
to mind.
dream in life is to make like a kung fu, like over-the-top kung fu style movie based on the destruction of Jedriga's hostel. Like, this is so if you're listening, this is a story where when the ships of the invaders land on the shores of Ireland, they slam into the beach so hard that miles away the roof of the hostel shakes and pieces of the roof fall to the ground. And they're like, what is that? You know, when one hero starts to start a fire and he's shooting sparks from his flintstone, miles away they hear the explosive noise and they say, well, that can only be one thing. The Flintstone of so-and-so. So this is a really over-the-top Irish battle story. The basic
Nice.
storyline is that the High King of Ireland, Conara, has, first of all, broken all of his geisa,
Okay.
which he has, what, like 30? 17?
I think at least 8, and I know it's more than 8.
It's a lot. I think it's at least double digits.
Okay.
So this guy has got, let's say, a dozen or more geisa. And he doesn't just break one of them. He managed to, in true poetic style, manages to break all of them one after another in the same day. Which you know is bad. And then he's like, well, let's go spend the night at this hostel. And
Which,
so...
The hostel's not exactly like, it's not Australian backpackers living there, right?
Exactly.
For a night.
So a hostel in the old days because travelers faced a lot of dangers on the road.
Mm-hmm.
And if you were traveling, you're away from your family, which as we learned last time is like the unit of society.
Mm-hmm.
So you're nobody if you're not with your family.
Okay.
So you might find someone who's willing to extend the laws of hospitality to you and take you under their roof.
So it is kind of like a hostel.
It is, and it's sort of like it's a safe place where you don't have to hope that someone will take you in. You can go and get nourishment and that kind of stuff.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And it would mostly be upper class people doing this because who else travels?
Okay.
Right?
Hmm.
So it was this great hostel, but this particular one, they typically have like a huge amount of beer being served, and there's always feasting, and can get a room and that kind of stuff. This particular one is a bit otherworldly, and as the High King settles in, he starts to realize that some of the people there seem to be these famous heroes from long ago who should be dead now. And there's also a giant there who's never been seen since the mythological days of the great past, Yeah, so anyway, this little excerpt that we just read is a snippet of poetry that says what happens when you break a geis. And it's actually two of the raiders who are coming to sack the hostel while the High King is there. One of them has found out that the High King is there, and he doesn't want to betray his High King. And he says, guys, maybe we should rethink this going and sacking the hostel. And the other one said that poem, which translates something like, it cannot be prevented. Clouds of weakness take you. The slaughter will destroy two great heroes. It will drive Fair Rogan to break his word. It will drive Fair Rogan to flee. I hear your voice breaking, O Lomna. Are you afraid to fight? Clouds of weakness take you.
That's what happens when you break a geis.
This destruction is inevitable.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
I see. So, mind you, if you are thinking about doing an Airbnb in Ireland, you might end up with a destruction of...
Yeah, read the fine print about Geisa.
Yeah, there's
and
like
also hosting giants, which is complicated.
Don't just click agree without reading it.
You're going to want insurance. This is the short version.
Yeah, okay, well, thank you for that. That's awesome. Okay, so next, we've got a real treat for everybody. Andre, you're a brilliant storyteller, and I place a case on you that you must tell us a story.
A story. Most underwhelming case.
Before bedtime.
Oh, wow. Okay. There's a time limit on this one. That's good. That's workable. That's not lifelong. I can
a bedtime story that must involve some kind of terrible tragedy resulting from geisha.
Well, there's some tragedy in this story. Okay. I can go with that.
All right.
Right. So for those of you listening, if you know anything about Irish stories and folklore, you may have heard of the pursuit of Diarmuid and Grainne. And this story is different from almost all other Irish stories because it is not primarily a battle story, and it's actually a love story. It is about two star-crossed lovers and their chase as they run away to try to be together, and her intended husband comes after them.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, listeners, if you want to find this story by Googling it, you'll probably need to know the spelling, so check our show notes.
Yes.
We'll put spelling for a lot of these words in there that, because Diarmuid is not spelled like it sounds.
Yeah. And there are a lot of versions online. That is normal. I'm actually going to be mixing when I tell the story some things from the written down medieval manuscript version and some things from the oral versions that are many different variations. I don't know of a single great translation into English that just tells the saga of Diarmuid and Grainne. So if listeners, you know of one, tell us.
So this podcast will become the authoritative source in English?
This is the one. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
You should definitely put that in your branding.
All right.
The definitive source.
Did I just level up to the next rank in society? What's my honor price now?
You're now a third Fermiva?
Third Fermiva? Man between huts times 3?
Yeah, you can now rent 4 cows at a time. I think it's 8 cows.
Yeah.
You might want to warn Rachel. She can veto that.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so this story is part of the Fenian cycle of Irish myth, which means it takes place in the time when the Finna roamed the land. The Finna, you can translate that word as warbands, which we've been doing in this series. It's a little bit more complex than that. Finna are what I like to call Irish ninjas.
Sure,
yeah,
why not?
Yeah. I think that captures really nicely the way they fought, the way they lived, and how they were sort of outside of society. There were different kinds of warriors in mythical Ireland, and to some extent in real Ireland also.
Sure.
But at least in the stories, there were the chariot warriors, who were usually like upper-class people. They were raised from a young age expecting that they would be great warriors, and they would fight formally from chariot back and in single combat and things like that. And these are who are the stuff of the great legends of the heroic cycle. When we talked about Cuchulainn earlier, one of the 2 greatest heroes of Irish stories, he was a chariot warrior. The other main type of warrior in Irish stories are the Finna. And Finn Mccool, who will be one of the characters in the story, was the leader of all the Finna of Ireland at the time. It's a coincidence. His name is not related to the word Finna, but his name is Finn, and his warbands are called the Finna.
Finn Mccool sounds like a Disney name, too.
It does, right?
Like a Toy Story character.
And fun fact, that word we used in the last episode, we were talking about female slaves, unfortunately, who were allowed under the rules. Cumul, so his name means Finn, the son of a slave girl. Oh. Finn Mccool, but it's because of the pronunciation, the grammar rule, it becomes Finn Mccool.
I see. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So Finn, the son of a slave girl, he was low-born, and that's the first thing you should know about the Finna, is they were not necessarily born into these upper-class warrior families. Anybody could become a Finn.
By the by, it's also interesting, not only that you could take the name of a slave, but also that you would take matriarchal lineage type of name.
Right.
In other words, the name of your mother, not your father.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which did happen.
Did happen occasionally, yeah. Not super common, but it did. It definitely did. And I forget the story with Finn, if he just didn't know who his mother was or what the deal was. Sorry, who his father was, yeah.
Okay.
So a little bit about the Finna. I'm just going to start by talking, because the entire story is about people who are members.
We'll see you next episode for the actual story.
Right, for the actual love story. But all the guys in the story are Finna, and it was a really badass thing to be a member of a Finna at this time. So first of all, you didn't have to be highborn. If you were a young man, or in many cases, young woman, they did accept there were female Finna as well, and you wanted to adventure a bit, you could go and basically request, like, can I join this warband? And you would not necessarily be allowed to enter. You had to prove yourself. So you would first go through an extensive series of training. And this was like, it included things like martial training, like, how to use a spear and stuff like that. It also included things like mastering poetry and the different forms of poetry. So there were all kinds of kind of like classical education elements you had to learn to get in.
Yeah.
And then you would be tested. And the test, there was a variety of tests. You had to go through all of them and pass them all. One of them was you would be buried up to your neck in a hole so that you couldn't use your arms. And then all the other members of the warband would stand around and chuck spears at your face. So you had to dodge each one just by jerking your face out of the way at the last second.
What?
Yeah. Yeah, so that was one of the tests. And I don't know if they used like blunted spears, like maybe you'll lose a tooth if you mess it up, or if this was just like life or death, like you better pass.
The bluntest spear on Earth could still take an eye out.
Could take an eye out, yeah. So I don't know how many one-eyed, like almost Finna were wandering around Ireland, but yeah. So that was one.
We also heard the test last time of running through the forest and your braids can't get caught in the trees or caught by the person chasing you.
Yeah, they would carefully braid your hair, make sure it's all perfect, and then you would start just one arm's length away from the person who'd be chasing you. When they yelled go, you took off into the forest, and the rule was you had to jump over at least one log as high as your shoulder and duck under at least one log as low as your knee, and you had to go through all these brambles and crazy thick forest. And when you finally got out the other side and crossed the finish line, if you didn't get captured, you still may not have won. They would then inspect your hair to see if any of your braid had gotten out of place by catching on thorns or things like that. And this is probably the most important test because this typifies what the Finna are. They are warriors who live outside of society. When you join the Finna, you give up your family association. You give up your family's right to compensation if you're killed or hurt. You leave your clan entirely, which is unheard of for any other role in Irish society, unless you were actually exiled by law. And you would go and live in the wilderness, in the wastelands, outside of farming areas, with the Finna, and they would now be your family until you finished your term of service. And you could eventually go back to your family.
So you'd be an outsider.
You'd be an outsider. You lost all social status.
And elementary school students in English class would read about you.
Exactly, yeah. There's a sorting hat to see who gets which. No.
The Finna and the Socias.
Exactly. Yes. And because you're living in the wilderness, the Finna became adept at things like hiding, stealth, ambush, subterfuge. They, unlike the high-ranking chariot warriors, they didn't go from feasting hall to feasting hall, being fed and given ale. They would hunt for their meals, and sometimes be given small donations of food by lords or by whoever as they were passing through. But a big part of their livelihood was hunting. So it really was this, like, you appear from the shadows, you come out of the woods, you come out of the bogs with no warning. And they also had a reputation for passing between the worlds. They could move into the spirit world and back. So they would even go into, like, the burial mounds and come out somewhere else.
I was just going to say, that kind of a outsider figure would just be robed around with superstitions.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So that's why I sometimes call them Irish ninjas, because to call them a war band, it doesn't get at the heart of, like, no, but these are the guys that come out of the shadows, they have, like, mystical powers, and they are just badass. They will crawl through a swamp for months to hide out if they need to come around and eventually stab the guy they're after, you know? So, yeah.
So these are covert ops. Guys.
Covert ops. Yeah. And in fact, now in modern Ireland, and this may have changed, but my understanding is, at least in the recent past, like the equivalent of the Navy SEALs of the Irish military are called the Finna.
I mean, in modern
like today,
military.
yes, like today.
Awesome.
So it's still a badass thing today.
So it really is special ops.
Special ops, yeah. Okay, so that's who these people are. So with that said, so one of the two most famous warriors in Irish history, Finn Mccool, at this point, when our story begins, Finn Mccool has become an old man. He has gone through many adventures, he's built up a great reputation, he's now the commander of all of the Finna of Ireland, he has a good relation with kings and heads of clans, and he has just lost his third wife. She passed away.
Oh.
Yes. And one morning he gets up very early and goes out to watch the sunrise, and his son and nephew, Oisin and Oscar, come out and chat with him. And they say, Finn, why are you up so early? Why are you sitting out here? And he said, because I have a heavy heart, because it's a very hard thing for a man to wake up without a wife. And they say, well, we should get you a new wife. And he says, well, I'm very old. What woman would want to marry me at this point? And they say, well, you're Finn Mccool. You're famous. Like any woman in the kingdom, in the five provinces of Ireland would want to marry you.
In fact, they could probably make a very successful reality show out of it too.
I would pay to watch that.
Yeah.
I actually want to host that show.
Who Wants to Marry a Millionaire?
Who Wants to Marry Mccool? Just an old guy with a spear. You just have to trust he's really badass.
Yeah.
Right. And so one of these two young guys says, I actually know the perfect wife for you. He says, who is that? And say, well, her name is Grainne, and she is the daughter of the High King of Ireland. And I have heard that she is the most beautiful woman and it's always right, most beautiful woman in all of Ireland, and also the best mannered and the most, and he has all these, adulations that he pours upon her.
She can sew like a son of a...
Right, exactly, yeah. So her personality's good, she's pretty, like the whole deal. And this is just the first of many times I'm just going to acknowledge, like, ancient Ireland, we said this once before, it was the most sexist ancient culture, except for all the other ancient cultures.
Yeah.
Right? So there was a very male-oriented culture with, like, a few rights for women. So Finn says, well, I don't want to go and ask for her hand myself, because at my age, I couldn't bear to be turned down by a beautiful young woman. It would break my heart.
And probably dishonor him.
Possibly dishonor him, right. Yeah. So his son and his nephew say, okay, we'll go for you and we'll ask for her hand on your behalf. He says, great. So they go to the High King's court. They're welcomed with a great feast. The High King is happy to see them. And he asks, why is it that you've come to me? And they say, we'll talk about that later. They don't want to do it publicly. Eventually they get a chance to pull the High King aside. And they say to him, we came to ask for your daughter Grainne's hand in marriage for our father, Finn Mccool. And the High King says this. He says, well, there is not a prince or a king in all of Ireland who has not yet gotten a refusal from Grainne. So I would rather if you go talk to her yourself so you can hear her refuse him, rather than blaming me when I tell you.
There's not a prince who has not received a refusal.
Yes.
Everybody has been refused.
Exactly. Every man who's asked, no matter how important they are.
Okay.
And I like this because it does demonstrate that although marriages were basically an arranged contract between families and the woman did not necessarily have a lot of say, if she refused, that was taken seriously. Like, okay, we're not going to cut you off against your will. You can say no. And you can question, I mean, if it was a different king or a different man in a different circumstance, would he have just said to his daughter, like, you got to do this. This guy's really famous. Just do it.
Yeah.
I don't know. But there was some, at least a pretense that they wanted the woman to say, yes, I personally agree to the union, not just my family says it's good. Well, that's kind of cool.
Okay. Yeah.
So we say it's like not quite the most sexist culture in ancient Europe. It's like that's why. Like they were like 2% not sexist.
Right.
So yeah. So anyway, so these guys go and they talk to Grainne, and they're braced for this. They've been told she's refused everyone. She's going to refuse your father Finn, and I just want you to hear it from her, so you won't be angry at me. I'm not the one refusing you. Go hear it from her.
Okay.
So they go to talk to her, and she says, "Why have you come?" And they say, "We came to ask for your hand for Finn Mccool." And she pauses and she says, well, if my father thinks he would be a suitable son-in-law, I see no reason why I wouldn't think he'd be a suitable husband. Sure. And everyone's surprised by that. Like really? What? Now you're agreeing? So is it because Finn is so famous? Is it because she's sick of hanging around the palace? We don't know. But for whatever reason, this time she's like, yeah, thumbs up, let's do this.
Maybe she's got a thing for old people.
Maybe she's got... We'll quickly find out that's not the case. So there's a date arranged where the High King's family and Finn and his Finna are going to meet at a certain location and have a feast, a wedding feast, and they will officially sleep together for the first time, and that's how you get married in Ireland.
Yeah, okay.
You get drunk, you get drunk, and you have sex, and the next morning you're married. Right? So they arrive at this big meeting, and Grainne sees Finn Mccool for the first time, and right away she's like, ooh.
What was she expecting? This guy's like 90?
He's old. Yeah, he's quite old. So, and she starts asking about the other men at the feast. She's asking somebody who knows all the finish. She's like, who is that man over there with the graceful legs? Oh, who is that man over there with the blonde hair? Oh, who's that man who is so good with the hounds? And she has like a little compliment for every man she asks about. But then she gets to Diarmuid, and you can kind of tell she's already a little sweet on him. Because she says, oh, who is that man who is so sweet with his words and has one curling lock of black hair above his brow and has 2 rosy red cheeks and such pale skin and stands with such posture and she has goes out at length and they're like, yeah, that's Diarmuid. She's one of the Finn. She's like, and who's the man next to him? She just moves on like nothing. You didn't see anything here.
She just had to add that one in to kind of cover her tracks
exactly,
a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh, and that other guy next to him, how about him?
And she's already forgetting that guy's name. Yeah. Right. Now, Diarmuid is dealing with a bit of a curse or a blessing. that many men listening to this might not think would be a curse. Diarmuid, for lengthy reasons I won't get into, at an earlier point in his life, he ended up getting a love spot. That's how it's translated from the Irish.
Okay.
A love spot.
Okay.
Which, as far as we can tell, is
like
some kind
mole?
of... No, well, it's like the opposite of mole. It's some kind of mark, which is on his forehead. I don't know if it's a birthmark-looking thing, or if it glows, or what.
It glows,
but the
like
problem is,
nose.
it's like a superpower that you kind of don't want. So, anytime a woman looks at him, if they catch sight of his love spot, they are immediately smitten. They want him immediately.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, right. And that sounds great. It probably was great when he first got it. He was like, this is awesome!
Yeah.
But it causes a lot of problems. Like, men's wives are falling in love with them, like older warriors' daughters, like all kinds of, like, you don't want the trouble that comes with this in a very honor, loyalty-based society.
So this guy's the heartbreaker.
He's the heartbreaker. So he has taken measures to solve this problem.
Okay.
He always wears a hat, and he wears it pulled real low down over his forehead.
Yeah.
So the love spot's always covered. Always covered. So just looking at him and not seeing the love spot, Diarmuid was already a little sweet on him.
Okay.
So far, she hasn't seen the love spot.
Uh-huh.
So the marriage feast starts, and a feast in these days was all kinds of things. There might be like guys getting up and doing feats of strength or wrestling. There'd be like bringing the hounds out, showing off everybody's cool horse, cool dog, things like that. So at some point, Diarmuid was outside, and he went outside to feed some of the scraps to the hounds, and he starts playing with the dogs, and he's like wrestling around with them and pulling with them and all that kind of stuff. And one of the dogs jumps up on him. These are big deer hounds, so it's like as big as a person. Jumps up on him and pushes him back a little bit, and for a second, his hat falls off onto the ground.
Yeah.
At that moment, at the wedding table, at the hand of Finn Mccool, Grainne just happens to look out the door and see this man and catches sight of the love spot and
twinkling
in the night. Yes. Now Diarmuid has no idea that anyone saw him, and he immediately darts for the ground, grabs the hat, and throws it back on his face and looks around. He doesn't see anybody. He finishes feeding the dogs and comes back in. But Grainne now has a mission.
Oh yes.
She takes one look back at Finn Mccool, a respected warrior, a leader of men, but older, sagging skin. And she just says, no, I'm not doing this. But she's wily. She doesn't stand up and make a scene. She actually goes and prepares a vat of wine. And this would be part of the wedding ceremony in medieval Ireland, is that when the woman comes and gives a cup of wine to her intended, that is her symbolically giving, something else very sweet to her intended. And when he takes it and drinks of it, that's him saying, I accept that, and then they're going to go get it on later. Right? So she goes and prepares a vat of wine, and she sprinkles...
And at this point, she's thinking, gonna use my arms, gonna use my legs. Gonna make you want me.
Do we just, pull that out as, a soundbite and use it for something? So she prepares this wine, and she sprinkles druidic herbs into it, and makes a sleeping potion out of the wine. And she waits until there are certain, because there's men who have to go guard the door at different times. It's it's still a military kind of, the High King is here, all these great men are here. So they are always guarding the doors, and they'll take turns. You guard for so long, while I go get drunk, and then you go get drunk while I guard the door. So she waits until Diarmuid and a couple of his friends are guarding the door and not drinking. And she brings out the vat of wine. And she goes and offers the first cup to Finn. He takes it and drinks of it, and everyone applauds. And then the wine is passed around, and everyone is served the wine.
Wait, the whole vat has the love potion in it?
The whole vat!
What?
Oh, yeah, the full 9 yards. Yeah.
This seems poorly planned.
I also wonder, how many sleeping herbs did she have with her? She's just packing this in a backpack just in case,
Okay.
But, really, I guess, is there ever... Why not?
Wait, so what is this love potion? Is this roofies to make you go to sleep, or is this gonna make you fall in love?
It's not a love potion, it's a sleeping potion.
Okay.
Yeah. So everyone there drinks it except the guys on guard, such as Diarmuid. And then everyone starts getting drowsy.
I like that the sexism of this is at least reversrsed.
Yeah.
You've got the woman roofying the man.
Exactly.
It's still sexist, but it's
true.
slightly more
acceptable. She can have her way with everybody there at this point.
Yeah.
I don't know. So bit by bit, all the warriors drop off, and soon the entire feasting hall is just snoozing, basically.
Yeah.
And except for Diarmuid and a few of his friends.
Okay. So she roofied the ones she didn't want.
Everybody else, yeah, right. So she goes to Diarmuid, and she just straight up tells him, she's like, I don't want to marry that man, and I want you to take me away from here.
Okay.
And he's like, but that man is he's the head of my warband. He taught me everything I know. He's my foster father. I can't turn my back on him. You're going to be his wife.
Yeah.
You know? And he said, no, I'm not going to help you get away from here. Like, that's my lord, basically. And there's a lot of, the word lord almost doesn't work because there's a lot of like personal, familial. It's almost like his adopted father, you know?
Yeah. Well, foster father is.
Yeah. I don't know if he's actually fostered by Finn or not, but yeah, that he was, you know, raised up through the Finn by him, and that's his warband captain, you know?
Yeah.
So a lot of personal loyalty. And he says, no, I'm not doing that. And she confesses her love to Jarmusch, and then she takes him like by the ears, I imagine.
I feel a gesh coming on.
And she says, I place druidic bonds upon you. I put a geis on you, that you will take me away from this place and away from Mccool. And you can just like see the blood just like draining out of Jarmusch's face as she says this.
It's like, well, shit.
And he still protests. He's like, why would you do that? Why would you do that to me? Like, he is my lord. I can't betray him. And she says, we need to leave now. And she says, I know where there is a side door where none of the people outside on guard will see us leave. And he says, I'm not leaving through a side door. I'm a warrior. And she's like, well, then figure it out. But I'm going to be outside waiting for you. You got to get me out here. Okay. So she walks off. That's how confident she is that the Geis will work. She's not going to argue with him. She Geished him. He'll be there.
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
He is not that confident. He immediately turns to his friends who just saw this happen, who were on guard duty with him.
Wait, I thought they were asleep.
Him and the few friends who were watching the door are all not roofied.
Okay.
Yeah. So he turns to his last friends who were still awake, who just watched this happen. And he says, guys, what do I do? And there are, I want to say 5 of them. And one by one, every single one of them gives their advice. And every single one of them gives the advice, you got to do what the Geis says.
So this is not a bros before hoes kind of ethos here.
If it was bros before hoes, maybe. But this is Geis before bros or hoes.
Okay, yeah.
And every one of them acknowledges, like, we understand, like, you don't want to do this, and it's not fair that she put you in this situation, but you have to. It is a Geis. You cannot refuse it, you know?
Okay.
And one of them even goes this far. He says, it's unfortunate, because if you break the Geis, you'll die. But if you follow the Geis and run away with her, Finn Mccool will come and kill you, and you'll die. There's no way you're going to win.
Yeah.
Like, Finn will definitely bring a whole army after you and murder you. Right? So you're going to die no matter what. You should just accept that, but you should still do the honorable thing and follow the Geis. Don't break the Geis.
And the honorable thing of following the Geis is apparently an even greater honor than following your lord.
They seem to believe it trumps his loyalty bonds to his warband captain.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because you're going to suffer dishonor either way.
Either
right?
way. Yeah. This is definitely one of those. It's just like when Cuchulainn couldn't take the food and couldn't refuse the food. It's like there's no good answer. But in this case, one is a Geis and one's not. So follow the Geis. Yeah. But they tell him, like, we are sure you'll die. This isn't like maybe you'll get away to safety. You know. So he, with a very heavy heart, he decides to go with her. And he's not leaving through the side door. So he actually, in the first of many pole vaulting scenes in this story, he takes his spear and takes a run at the wall of the fortress that they're in, and uses his spear to pole vault over the wall and flings himself over the fortress wall to the outside.
Wow.
Yeah. So that he doesn't have to leave in shame through a side door like a servant or something. Which there's a side door she told him about. He could have just walked out the side door.
I'd rather exit by hurtling helplessly through the air than go through a servant door.
Exactly. Yes. So when he gets outside, he finds Grainne, who is waiting for him in his chariot, in his own chariot.
Okay.
So like she had complete confidence he would be there. She's like, I got the car started. You know, yeah.
Yeah.
So he jumps in the chariot and he tells her, "All right, I'm taking you away from here, but that's the end of it. You know, like I'm not in this with you. I'm taking you away because you Geished me, basically." And they take off into the night. Okay. So meanwhile, in the morning, the sleeping potion wears off, and the men start to stir, and Finn wakes up. I'm imagining with just like raging morning wood, because he was supposed to get some last night.
Whatever he has at 90 years old.
Exactly.
But
like, he probably took Viagra herbs.
Yeah.
He didn't get the potion he was hoping for.
Imagine if when she was making that vat of sleeping potion, she actually accidentally grabbed the wrong herb.
You got a feasting hall full of boners.
An entirely different story.
That would really test honor at that point.
In fact, Rule 34 is now going to follow this If you don't know what that is, listeners, just look it up. We're not going to go
there. We won't break your innocence on that one.
Yeah.
So they start to wake up, and of course the 5 people who saw what happened know what happened, but they don't tell Finn right away. Because Diarmuid is their friend. And even though Oisin and Oscar are Finn's son and nephew, they're still going to kind of watch out for their friend.
Okay.
You know? So they don't tell him what happened right away, but bit by bit, it becomes apparent that everyone fell asleep and that Grainne is gone. And after a minute, also that Diarmuid is gone. So Finn jumps to the assumption that Diarmuid must have stolen Grainne and fled with her, run off with her.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, a
Pretty reasonable
leap to make, you know. And so he immediately flies into a rage, and he gets an entire clan one whole clan. Like, not like 5 guys or 10 guys. He's like, I want your entire clan to go after them in chariots and start tracking them. He chose the clan with the best hunting dogs. You're going to start tracking them while I get the rest of the army started.
Okay.
You know? Meanwhile, Diarmuid and Grainne have fled to a forest, and they know somebody will be after them. So before they get to the forest, they actually abandon his chariot on the banks of a river and cross through the river to get the hounds off their scent. And I assume go upriver or downriver or whatever. And then they take off on foot. And this is going to be their life for a while. Is you're wandering on foot, you don't have a chariot, you don't have friends, you don't have wealth, you can't show up in any great lord's home and ask for help, because everyone is against you. And
I feel like Johnny Depp is going to fill the role one day in this movie.
In Tim Burton's Pursuit of Diarmuid and Grainne.
Yeah. I feel like he would fill that role on the run.
His luck and, yeah, exactly. So they cross the river, they make off into this forest. And the clan sent after them lose the trail at the river. Meanwhile, he sends a message, I think by a bird or something like that.
A raven?
A raven, possibly? One way or another, his friends come and find out that he's in the woods. And they know that Finn is closing in the woods because even with his best hounds off the scent, they're starting to figure, okay, well, they're not over here, there's probably in these woods somewhere. So they send a message back to him warning him that Finn is coming. They know you're in the woods. Get out of the woods and keep running because they know where you are.
Okay.
And Diarmuid gets the message and he's like, oh, well, we're not running. And Grainne's like, what do you mean? And he's like, you engaged me to get you out of there. And I got you out of there. So I'm going to make my stand right here. My job is done.
I love
it. And she's like, you can't do that.
He played the system.
He played the system. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So he starts building a fortress.
Oh. Like a wooden stockade or something?
A wooden stockade, exactly. I mean, yeah, whatever you can do in a day or two with, hand tools. Yeah. He gets some branches and logs and starts building a wooden stockade. He builds it cleverly with, I'm sure it's small. Yeah. But, he builds it with 7 different little entrances on it. Okay. So that when Finn's army comes up and starts to surround it, they'll be like, which one is he going to try to flee through? Right, yeah. So they start to surround his little fortress. They're like, which way is he going to come out of? And Finn has to wait for enough soldiers to surround the whole thing. Meanwhile, Grainne is like, they're going to kill us. Like, they're going to kill both of us. And at that moment, they get a little bit of supernatural help. Diarmuid, it should be pointed out, is sometimes said to be the son of Angus Mccool. Okay. Angus Mccool is one of the gods of early Irish mythology. And there's not a lot of clear information known about all of the ancient Irish gods. Okay. But you can generally get a sense, reading the stories that mention Angus Mccool, that he is their equivalent of Cupid. He is always
He's a love god?
He's a love god, yes. Okay. He's a god of youth and love.
Well, that makes sense with his Harry Potter tattoo.
Exactly.
The scar that he has, that twinkles and grabs the eye of every young maiden.
Exactly, yeah. So this is his heritage. So his supposed father, the god of love and youth, who always appears as like an adolescent or young man. He never appears as an old man. So kind of like Cupid. And is this like many-colored, like all beautiful, magical god who is always helping out lovers and things like that. The biggest story about Angus Mccool is him suffering heartbreak, and nobody could cure his illness, and they had to go find the woman he was seeing in his dreams and all this good stuff. So Angus Mccool comes to them and says, Diarmuid, I'm going to help you out. I will get you out of here. I will take both of you. I can lift you up with my... He probably says druidic magic. I can lift you up with my divine powers and carry you through the sky in a cloud away from here. So you will not be pursued by Finn any longer. And Diarmuid says, I am not going to be the warrior who turns and runs. I am happy to make a stand here, He says, but take Grainne away and carry her off to safety so that she won't die when I am slaughtered.
He knows he's dead anyway.
He assumes he's going to die. Yeah. So that happens. The Angus takes Grainne away in a cloud of mist to the west, I think.
Okay.
And Diarmuid prepares for his final stand. And they start to surround. He can hear a battalion of soldiers at each of his 7 doors. But he has an idea. He goes around and he shouts through the first door, "Who is guarding this door?" And Oisin, one of the guys who let him escape and said, "Go follow your Geis, do it." Oisin is like, "Oisin and his men are guarding this door." He's like, "Oh, great." He goes to the next door. "Who is guarding this door?" Oscar and his men are guarding this door. And one by one, the first 5 doors are all buddies of his. And he knows that they're not going to break down the door and come for him. They're just going to hang out there and be like, "We're watching the door," and do nothing. He gets to the 6th door. It's one of Finn's men. The guy threatens him with death and ripping his body parts apart and all kinds of horrible stuff. And he keeps going. He gets to the 7th door. And he says, "Who is guarding this door?" And Finn Mccool says, "It is Finn Mccool." And that is when he realizes, okay, this is the door that has a fight. Those 5 doors are safe. And he does his pole vaulting move one more time.
Yes,
takes
pole
a run,
number 2.
Pole vault number 2. Takes a running stab at the far wall and leaps out over the side that's guarded by Oisin and Oscar, lands right in the midst of their troops, and they do nothing, and he turns and books it into the woods to the west in the same direction that Grainne went.
Why did they do nothing?
Because they were his friends.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. They're just there because Finn told us to come here, but we're watching out for our buddy.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So he makes off into the west. He and Grainne reunite thanks to Angus Mccool, but they're still fleeing. He still refuses the help to be kind of picked up and carried away, so to speak.
Okay.
So many, many adventures ensue. A couple of my favorites.
Does he become a full Jedi?
This is basically when he becomes a full Jedi. Yes. At one point, they are in a woods and they find this giant magical Rowan tree. Rowan was very important in Irish culture, and they take refuge in its branches. It's like gigantic. Like picture like a fantasy tree that goes up like thousands of feet, right? And Finn Mccool knows that they are somewhere in the area, and actually Finn's troops end up camping out around the base of the Rowan tree. And they can't see, they don't know that that Diarmuid and Grainne are right in the tree above them, because it's hundreds of feet up. But to pass the time, Finn and his son start playing Fichiel, which we talked about in the previous episode.
That's not like chess.
It's a game that's not at all like chess,
okay,
but sometimes translated as Irish chess.
Okay.
They started playing Fichiel. And the thing is, Finn was very good at Fichiel. It's a strategic game, and like really badass warriors tend to be good at it in the Irish stories.
Okay.
And the only person who could reliably beat him was Diarmuid.
Okay.
And so Oisin is playing against Finn and losing and losing and losing. And then they start a new game, and just as Oisin is about to make another bad move, a Rowan berry falls from above and lands on one of the squares of the board. And Oisin says, well, maybe I'll move there. And he moves there. It's a really good move. And then Finn takes his turn, and another Rowan berry falls from above and lands in another square, and Oisin moves there. And every time it's Oisin's turn, a Rowan berry falls from the sky and lands on the board, and every time he moves to where the berry is, he gets another great move, and eventually he ends up beating Finn for the first time ever. And Finn immediately knows what's happening. He stands up, he's like, there is not a man in this warband who could beat me at Fichiel except Diarmuid. And he is in this tree somewhere, So they have another great scene where they have to, fight, and
so he's up, he's in the tree, like
shaking
the branch,
shaking branches and dropping berries to show the right move. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's how close they are to being captured. There's many times where Finn is just hundreds of feet away, or just about to close the pinchers on an ambush, and every time they manage to get away. So it goes on like this. I believe that the story has them wandering for like 16 years.
Okay.
It's a long period of time. But not long after the Rowan tree incident.
And I have to imagine Finn as being like the sheriff in the Dukes of Hazzard, that every time that Diarmuid gets away, he's like, "You kids!"
Exactly. Yes. There's actually a beautiful passage in like one of the Fenian stories where Finn Mccool and one of his younger warriors have a debate about like the virtues of youth versus old age.
Yeah.
And Finn is like, "Experience matters." The other one's like, "No, I'm more flexible and stronger." And like they have it's like a big thing. So yeah, you kids. Crazy. So anyway, they're wandering. The life for Diarmuid and Grainne gets worse and worse as they go. They are running out of food. They are
plenty of berries, though, apparently.
They get plenty of berries in their diet. And also, this is kind of funny. I think maybe the reason they're running out of food is because Diarmuid observes this weird ritual that he decides upon, where every morning he will leave a piece of unbroken bread where they camped. Because he knows that Finn's trackers are not far behind them, and he believes it'll send a signal to Finn showing, I did not break trust with you. I have not touched her.
Oh.
So he never sleeps with Grainne at all. And every morning he leaves a piece of unbroken bread behind. So that might be why you're running out of food.
This guy's principled. He's like a paladin.
Oh, yeah. He is not. He's really trying to play it where, like, I'll fulfill the Geis, and I will also keep my honor to my lord.
Yeah.
And Grainne complains about this. Like, she wants it. She wants them to get together. And she's always putting moves on him. And she starts complaining about not getting any. Like, at one point, they cross a river, and she gets, like, water splashed all up on her legs and in her dress, and she's like, that's the most I've gotten all year.
Nice.
I think, actually, the way she says it is, like, a very, like, old Irish story way. She's like, that splash of water is more adventurous than you are, Diarmuid. Or something like that. But it's like, it's the most action I've gotten since we started this quest.
Okay. So thinking realistically, like she started this whole thing by placing a geisha on him. So why doesn't she just geisha him again to sleep with her?
Right. So I think that goes into like what we were saying about like a geisha is really, it's never casual. Right?
Yeah.
It has to be like it has to
reinforce
reflect some great
value.
truth in the world.
Yeah.
So the idea that she's in love with him and that they are meant to be together and she's not meant to be with this old man, that's geishable.
Yeah.
But the idea that, like, I want you to come give it to me tonight and you don't want to give it to me, that's just, like, abuse.
By the way, after this episode is done recording, geishable.com will go live and I will...
Geishable.
Yes.
You can vote. Like, is this geishable or not? Geish-worthy.
Yeah. Swipe right if it's geishable. Swipe left if not.
Swipe right if you geish this.
Whatever gets the most geishas actually happens.
Oh my god. So they're on the run, and they're getting dirty, tattered, running out of food, etc. And life is hard. And so one day they're walking along the coast, and a giant sea storm comes up. They're always in deserted areas. They're never near civilization, because if they were, they'd be captured.
Sure.
A giant sea storm comes up, and they're just being pelted with rain, and it's freezing cold, and they have nowhere to sleep. They've been camping out, and Diarmuid spots a little sea cave. He says, okay, we'll take shelter in the sea cave. So he gets them in there, and he manages to start a little fire or something, and tries to make it as hospitable as jagged, wet rocks can be in a storm. Mm-hmm. And while they're getting ready to have dinner, they hear something. And they see a boat pulling into the water in the sea cave. And this boat has come from across the western sea. And in the boat is one of the four, a one-eyed giant. And the Fori are the bad guys of Irish literature. In the early stories, the mythological cycle... Yes.
Fori.
Fori.
Is that it's spelled F-O-M?
Yeah. One is a four, and multiple are Fori.
Okay,
yes.
So I always pronounced it Fomori. But...
Right, yeah.
Okay.
It's how it looks in English. It's like Fomor, but it's Fomor.
Okay, all right, go on.
So if you read the mythological cycle, there's actually a war between the gods and the giants at one point. And the gods definitively triumph, and it's sort of like that's when they drove evil from the world.
Yeah, so the evil comes
But the god of heroes, Lu, did not take the advice of the goddess of death, Morian, who said, just wipe them all out, kill every last one of them. Instead, he made terms with them when they beat them. He said, okay, I'll spare you your life if you do this, this, and this for me. So that's why there's still some evil in the world, is because he didn't finish off the last of the Titans, so to speak. And for anyone who really is into this literature, that's not exactly right. The Fori are not evil, per se. But you could safely say that they're creatures of chaos and destruction, and they're very greedy, you know. So they're a little bit demonic, but, you know, it's not quite a black and white like good and evil. Right. But they're bad news. So you see one of these things coming in a boat. A huge one-eyed giant with its cudgel and everything else. And it comes in and it sees them and it says, awfully rough weather out there.
Of course that's what a giant would say. Let's talk about the weather.
And they're like, yeah. And he's like, can I share your fire?
This is like a Disney character, too. It's the nicest giant.
It's this awkward situation where, like, normally he might be trying to eat them, you know?
Shrek, I think.
It's like pre-Shrek. Yeah, it's like the proto-Shrek, basically. So, I mean, normally they might be at odds, but it's like they've both been driven to shelter by the same storm. So it's kind of like there's a certain amount of peace, you know? Like, we're both here by circumstance, let's not fight, let's, like, hang out together.
Sure.
So they agree to share their fire with him. And he says, to pass the time, why don't we play a game of fecal?
He's not going to win.
You would think. Yeah, Diarmuid is like pretty confident. He's like, well, you might have heard about me from the fecal championship. Ever heard of the Rowan Berry incident?
Right.
So he's really confident that he can beat this giant. He's like, absolutely, let's play a game. And the giant beats him.
Oh. Whoa.
And when the giant beats him, he's like, basically, he says, what do I get for winning?
Uh-huh.
And Jarmusch is like, we have nothing to give you. I didn't know we were playing for stakes. And he's like, then I'll take the girl.
So at this point, Jarmusch is motivated to just be like, okay, take her.
Exactly. And this is when he turns. Like,
Okay.
so first of all, when the giant says that, he says, then I'll just take the girl.
Uh-huh.
And he puts his arm around Grainne.
Uh-huh.
And Grainne does this. She looks at him and kind of smiles. And she's like, finally, I'm going to get to an action. She says something like that. Like, she literally is like, ooh. And Jarmusch just snaps. Like, he draws his sword and just, like, pushes the giant off her, and they fight. And he ends up killing the giant.
Wow.
And Jarmusch is like, don't kill him, and he fucking beheads the thing.
Okay.
Yeah. So he drops this giant dead on the ground. And it's like a reversal for both of them. Like, she was like, oh, maybe I'll go with this guy then, and kind of like, you know, making little flirty faces at him.
Yeah.
And Jarmusch suddenly is like, oh, no, you're not, you know, and fights this giant who was about to abduct this girl he's traveling with.
Uh-huh.
And you might think, if you read old Irish stories, that killing a giant to save a girl would be this great thing. And she'd be like, yay, you saved me. And she was like, why would you do that? And he's like, he was about to abduct you. Why wouldn't I do that? I've saved you. And she's like, no, you know, like, you haven't touched me at all. And he's the first person ever shown interest in me. And they get in a fight. And she actually draws her little knife that you would use for, like, cutting meat or whatever. And she stabs Jarmusch in the thigh, like, in anger. And then she just storms off out into the storm. Yeah. And he's standing there bleeding and shaking, and there's like a giant's head in his hand and whatever else. And he watches her walk out in the rain. And this is the point where he could just be free, the whole thing. He could just hang out in the cave, and he's done with her.
This is the point where he turns to the camera and just shrugs.
He's like, that was weird. Back to Fikil. Who wants to play another game? And instead, he follows her out in the storm, and he starts chasing her across the heath.
Uh-huh.
And all night, he's following her and trying to catch up with her, and she does not want to talk to him.
So now she's playing hard to get, and suddenly
Suddenly he's interested. Exactly. And when the dawn finally comes, and the storm clouds start to break, and the rain stops, he catches up to her on these cliffs overlooking the sea. And he basically says, like, you can't run away. I can't protect you if you run away from me. And she's like, I don't want your protection. Like, you don't care about me. And he says, why would I care about you? One moment, your love is as beautiful as a green tree heavy under blossom. The next moment, it is as cold as a winter wind. Like, you're just going from man to man here. Finn, now me, now the giant. Why would I possibly love you? You know? And she says that she loves him, and he starts to just unload. You know, he just goes into like, why did you do this to me? I had a life. I had brothers at arms. I had a future as a Finn. And I had a commander who I looked up to and respected, and the promise of riches and a good marriage and a good family someday. And now I'm wandering. We don't have food. We don't have shelter. We don't have friends. I've betrayed everyone I love. And we're living in a cave with giants, you know? And he just unloads on her. And she suddenly realizes, like, how much she's put him through just to get away from this man she didn't want to marry. And she starts to cry, and she says, but I've always loved you. He says, you don't love me. You love the spot on my head.
You love my spot.
You love my love spot. And she's like, no, the first time I saw you when you were wearing your hat, I knew I wanted to be with you. And I've always loved you. Never Finn, never the giant. And he's like, really? And they sit down next to each other on the edge of this cliff. And they just kind of sit in silence for a long time, you know? And finally, like, as if to break the silence, she says, are you hungry? Do you want something to eat? He says, if you have some food, I would gladly take some. She's like, okay, I'll cut some of what we have left. And she's like, where's the knife? And he's like, it's exactly where you left it. Those are his exact words. She's like, where's my knife? And he's like, it's exactly where you left it.
She's like, oh yeah, oops.
So she has to reach over and like, pull the knife out of his thigh, wipe it off.
That is
and cuts their last rations up, you know, and she makes them a little cold meal, covered in, they're soaked, they're sitting on the edge of this cliff, and they eat this meal together. And all the story says is that the next morning and every morning thereafter, Jarmusch did not leave unbroken bread for Finn, he left broken bread. So from that point on, they're in love and they're getting it on. So, Diarmuid and Grainne wandered for years. One version of the story has it up to 16 years. And eventually, Finn got them cornered. Finn was sick of them getting away. I don't know how old Finn is at this point, like 105. He's like, I'm not going to go to my grave until I get that girl.
He's like, the death rattle isn't going to come until he finally succeeds, and then he's just going to be like,
immediately rolls over. Yeah, right. This is his white whale for sure. So he's sick of them getting away, and Finn is also a little supernatural. He was actually, although his mother was that low-ranking servant girl, he was fostered by a woman from the other world. And so he actually goes to the other world and asks his mystical foster mother, who's one of the she people, essentially one of the, you could say maybe the elves, or something like that. Spirits. One of these divine spirit-like people. He asks her for her counsel, and she says, oh, I'll help you out. Don't worry. Just leave it to me. And so she comes back to like the physical world with him. And she puts a druidic mist over him and his Finna. While Diarmuid and Grainne are taking shelter in Mccool's house. There's a famous monument in Ireland to this day. You can go tour it. It's now called Newgrange. It's one of the most famous megalithic tombs in the world. Originally it was called Brú na Bóna, which means the house, essentially, of the Boyne River, or the house of the goddess Boan, who is Angus's mother. And so since it's his mother's house, it's his house, and since it's his house, he says, Diarmuid and Grainne, come stay with me. It's mystical here. You'll be totally fine, you know. So they're staying with, like, a god. Meanwhile, Finn goes and gets, like, a goddess to help him out. Not actually a goddess, but a divine mystical character. And Diarmuid doesn't know that Finn is closing in on them because it's just a misty day, and all of his forces are hidden in the fog. And Diarmuid says, I'm going to go out and go hunting and get us some food. So he goes out to go hunting. He figures the mist will cover me really well. And just then, Finn springs his trap, and all of his men start to come out of the mist and converge on Diarmuid. And Diarmuid is fighting him off, you know, ferociously. And Finn's foster mother, this spirit woman, uses a very special power of hers. She has a leaf that has a hole in it that she found, like as if like a worm took like one bite out of the middle of the leaf. So there's a little tiny hole. You can't cut the hole yourself. You have to find a leaf with a hole in it. So she takes this leaf, and she uses her magic to lift herself up into the sky. And she gets behind the leaf and starts to chant through the hole in the leaf. And when she chants through the hole, it begins to shoot magical spears or darts at Diarmuid. So it's like the original magic missile spell.
Wow.
Yeah, but you need the leaf to do it, right? And
you need your magical ingredients.
Exactly. So he's holding off these men who are all around him, but then these darts start hitting him and ripping him to pieces, and every one like takes off another chunk of flesh or cuts into him somewhere else, and he can't stop them. They go through right through his shield. He can't block them, you know, and he's just getting torn to pieces. And he looks up and sees this woman of the she in the sky blowing and chanting through this leaf, and these darts leaping from the leaf to him, and he realizes the only chance I have is if I can hit her, but the only way I'll be able to hit her is if I can hit her through the hole in the leaf. She's magically shielded everywhere else.
It's like the chink in Smaug's armor.
It's like the one vent in a certain space station we know of. So he turns off his targeting computer.
Use the force, Diarmuid.
So Diarmuid takes his spear, it's known as the Red Spear, and he heaves it in a great throw, and it flies true, and it goes right through that hole in the leaf, and right into the face of the woman of the she, and she goes through her head, she drops out of the sky, and he runs over and beheads her, and takes the head of Finn's mystical foster mother, and kicks the body aside. The men who are all around him at this point are so freaked out, they're just backing off. Like, they just saw him beat someone from the she, you know, and he just essentially makes off into the mist. When the body of the foster mother is returned to Finn Mccool, obviously, first of all, he's grieving. And secondly, it might send a little bit of a message that, like, you're just not going to get this guy, right? And that is the point at which he says, I want to talk terms. And so Mccool comes and brokers the peace between the two factions.
Between Finn and Diarmuid.
Yeah, exactly. Between Finn and Diarmuid. Finn allows Diarmuid to take some land, including the land that was historically belonged to his family and a couple other tracts of land. And they agree to make peace, and Diarmuid is going to keep, you know, like he and Grainne are an item now, right? So they're just going to stay together, and Finn can find someone else, basically. So it's a really big blow to Finn's, like, honor and his pride and everything else. But they're finally making peace. And Diarmuid and Grainne retire to one of the tracts of land they got. It's an area in County Sligo called Keshkaran. And the caves of Keshkaran are stunning and beautiful. Like, you can go tour those as well. They're great. They look very magical. Like, you walk in and you're like, oh yeah, I'm definitely going to Narnia. I'm not coming out of this cave in one piece. And it's one of the only Irish stories that has a sort of happy ending. They live for many, many years. They have 4 sons and a daughter together, Diarmuid and Grainne. and they're sweetly in love the whole rest of their life. It's not exactly happening. Eventually, Diarmuid is killed by a boar that he's hunting in a boar fight, and Finn has the chance to maybe magically bring him back to life, but is a little bit slow on the take, so he dies before Finn can do it. And you kind of get the sense like Finn did that on purpose. So, I mean, eventually, like all Irish stories, it has a tragic end.
Sure.
But everybody's got to die somehow, and they did live for many, many years happily together.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was one Geis where the person never broke it, and the story never bit them in the butt for breaking it. It's one of the only geisha in all of Irish literature that I can think of that doesn't get broken a few pages later.
Wow. That is amazing. And we also got a kind of a primer if you want to get your man, ladies. So let's see if we can break it down, right?
Sleeping potion.
So, yeah. So first, Roofy the wingman.
Yes.
Is step one. Right? Step two, use the customs of society against the guy to guilt him into.
The key words here are druidic bonds are upon you.
Yes. Write that down.
Yeah.
Obtain supernatural aid to get away.
You're definitely going to want at least one flying spell to make this work. Take a pole vaulting class.
Take a pole vaulting class in case you have to do that to keep up with the guy. Make him jealous with a giant.
Yes. If he's not responding to your advances, it's okay to stab him in the thigh.
Yeah, stab him in the thigh.
Don't hit the groin, you're going to want that later.
Yeah.
But the thigh is mostly just like flesh.
Yeah, or any other expendable piece of his body. And finally, just be patient. For like 16 years?
Sometimes, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You know. Pop it in the oven for 16 years and bing, you're done.
And definitely jealousy and playing hard to get will win him over.
Yeah.
Those two things.
Yeah. You got that? Good.
I think it'll work. Yeah.
Wow, that was amazing. There's no way that I'm going to follow that with anything. That was just over the top awesome. And listeners, you didn't get to see this part, but Andre told that whole thing pretty much extemporaneously. He's got like an outline of like 10 lines that he was working with for that.
Like, don't forget the chess game.
Yeah, that's not if you see my notes, like every word is written out. I don't read it actually, but I was like, I gotta like control what I'm gonna say. But that was, oh my god, that was impressive.
I love these stories, and yeah.
That was good. Okay, well, it's that time. It's that time, so we have to draw this to a close. But thank you very much.
Absolutely.
So, listeners, we are still not done yet. This was part 3, and we are following this next with our interview with Dr. Gillian Kenny of Trinity College in Dublin, who's going to talk to us about the position of women and women in magic in medieval Ireland. So that is going to be very interesting.
Will she cover like hot topics, like 12 things to do with your sleeping potion, or like
yeah, definitely
5 ways to get out of a castle with your man?
I'll ask her.
Yeah,
I'll ask her. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So join us next week for that, everybody. Andre, once again, time for your plug.
Yeah, so if any of you love coloring or you have to buy a gift for someone who loves coloring, we just released a coloring book for grown-ups and people of all ages called Introvert Dreams. It tells a touching story in both pictures and words of a journey into an inner dream world for anyone who loves quiet and exploring a fantasy landscape would be a good gift. So Introvert Dreams, that is available on Amazon.com, right?
And check it out. It's awesome. Folks, if you like this series, let us know. Write us in at deadideaspod@gmail.com. And if you have a dead idea that you'd like us to explore, we definitely want to hear about it. So write us in. I'm BT Newberg, and this is Dead Ideas. Hey, thanks for listening, everybody. Remember, you can get great perks by supporting the show on Patreon at www.patreon.com/deadideaspod. For $5 a month, you can get your portrait done in the time period and culture of your choosing. And if you've already received a portrait for a review, you can get another one for yourself or for a friend by contributing. There's that and lots of other great perks at Patreon. You can see that and lots more on our supporters page on our website, www.deadideas.net. There's also a map of Ireland, references to the books and articles used in the show, and lots more. It's also just a beautiful website with graphic design by Rachel Westhoff. So visit us at www.deadideas.net. All right, see you next week, everybody. Bye.